host a heavyweight world title fight and actually be the first woman to do so, and actually the first woman to work in boxing globally, because I wanted to do that from a very young age. I was a massive boxing fan. I used to read I've still got loads of Muhammad Ali books. I used to read his books from such a young age. I don't even know why. And I just really, really loved it. And I think I loved it because to me, I don't know, it's probably more about what the stories were off the ring and out of the ring. But I just felt like it took so much strength, and I just loved the sport, and I still do. I still train. In fact, I've got a boxing gym just down the road, and I don't know, I just was so passionate about the skill of boxing, about, the mental side of it and the amazing human stories, and the fact that you can use the boxing ring as a tool and as a voice, no matter who you are. Somebody like Muhammad Ali, or, it's a great place for people that have been, it gives opportunities to people that, maybe haven't had them from a young age. And so when I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, because I remember when I was a child and I was like, oh, I'd love to stand by the ring and be behind the microphone. And I think I just planted that in my head. But the other reason why is when I first opened the door into a certain person's office and said, I'd really love for you to give me an opportunity on your boxing team. And I was already part of that network. I was already doing really well there. And I trained in boxing, I'd been in the ring, I'd fought, I just was so passionate about it and knew it so well. And this person isn't in their job now, but the head of that network said to me, no, boxing isn't ready for, the boxing world, something like the boxing world isn't ready for a woman. And I was like, for a woman to talk about boxing, something that, women don't talk about. And I was like, this was before the Olympic Games in 2012. So it was before women were allowed to box in the Olympics, which Nicola Adams went and did and won gold, which is incredible. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was and I was kind of shocked, but at the same time, I was so used to those attitudes in a way. And then I was like, yeah, but why does it mean that I, because I'm a woman, that I don't know or can't talk about boxing? And in fact, if I look at the team, I'm the one that trains in it and knows it so well. And, I learned how to, commentate, I learned how to score, all these things, but I also trained in it. I knew the sport. I was so passionate about it. And I was like, why can't, there are women boxers, there are pro boxers. At the time, there was professional female boxers, but it's grown so much now. And so I remember walking out in the office and shutting the door and being like I genuinely was, I don't even mind saying it. I genuinely was like, I was like this. And I remember walking out of the office and I was like, right. I was like, and it was like holding a red rag to a bull, because I was just like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I just tried and I tried and I tried so hard to show that, that I knew boxing. So because I did a little bit of boxing, when I was presenting Sky Sports News. So whenever there was a boxing segment, I'd make sure I asked to present it. And then when women were allowed to box in the Olympic Games, I used that opportunity to say, well, can I cover the women then? And then at the same time, I was like, well, you might as well let me cover the men too. And then it grew from there. So, and I think there's a massive message in that, if somebody says you can't do something, it doesn't mean they're right. I think what I did was I just never gave up. So, I had so many people turn around and say, I was tall and I was very blonde then. I'm not now. And I think people looked at me and was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. That horrible, I hate it so much, that horrible stereotype where it's you're judged on the way you look. No matter how you look, you're judged on it. And it's hang on, see past, the book cover. And I think also I had a really broad Yorkshire accent then as well. And I think people were like, and so I did get rejected so many times. And also there were so many times that I went up for things and they were like, oh, we don't want a woman. So I'm like, oh my gosh. But these were things that I couldn't change. I can't change the way I look. I can't change that I'm a woman. I can't change the fact that I'm from Yorkshire. And actually all these things are my assets. So what people might say is you're negative, don't forget that, yes, that might be one person's opinion, but it might be the other reason. It might be another person's reason that they actually want to work with you. So because it's not, it is quite a tough industry. And I think like what I did was I made contacts. I put myself out there because I didn't have any contacts. I didn't have any money. I didn't know anybody. I'm not somebody's, daughter that works in this industry. Like I didn't even know anybody in London. I moved to London, with nothing and not knowing anybody. And I just started to make contacts and started to plug away. Put myself on courses. I put myself on a journalism course. I used other jobs to pay my way. Like I worked as a personal trainer and taught fitness to try and pay. I did modeling as well. And I just kept on striving and kept on learning my craft, which is really important. Learn your craft, make sure you know what you're talking about. And that's how I got into sports broadcasting, because I remember going up for my very first job and I got the job, but I think it was over 1,000 people went for the job. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, you should go for this job. And it was in football. And I knew football like the back of my hand. I've been going to football games since I was a child. I play football, and it was my love. Like I was brought up in Sheffield. It's a huge footballing city. And I remember going up for this interview and I walked in and I was the only one wearing a pair of jeans. I remember exactly, a pair of ripped jeans, a white t-shirt, and I'd got massive high heels on, long blonde hair. And I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh. Like everybody was wearing a suit. Everybody was at least 10 years older than me. And I probably spotted 2 other women and everybody else was a man. And I nearly walked out. Like I very nearly walked out because I was just like, I'm not going to get this. Like I'm not good enough. All these people are better than me. And I think just, even though you have those voices, just ignore them. just do it, because you never know what might happen. And it turns out I got the job, and I got the job, not because, I don't know, like I obviously wasn't wearing a suit, but not because of all those things. And obviously you do have to, make sure you dress how you want to be perceived and all these kind of things. But at the same time, they gave me the job because I knew my stuff. Like I was the one person in there that I could talk about football all day long because it was my passion. And also like, I think because I thought I wasn't going to get it, I wasn't kind of scared like this, and I just talked and I ended up getting the job, and then I kind of pushed on from there really. And, there's so many times that, there's things that like I worked so hard for and it didn't happen, but then there's so many things that I've worked so hard for that have happened. And I think that's important to remember. No, we haven't reached equality in sport, but we've improved. I mean, we've improved even since I started my career. I started my career in sport, and there was no women's sport anyway, not really on a professional level. There wasn't a grassroots level. And, for me, if I look at when I was younger, there's been so much change. Like I would never have seen, like I wanted to be a professional athlete, but I would never have seen that as a viable career path when I was younger, but it is now, which is amazing. So it has improved so much in that sense. And also when I started my career in terms of sports broadcast, when I was mainly doing sport, there was like, I hardly ever worked with women, ever. I mean, like in front of camera, behind camera, ever. It was just, it was, a men's club. So it's changed in that sense because we're seeing women in front of camera more. We're seeing people play for professional sport. We're seeing women's coaches. We're seeing various different roles, but it's still not an equal playing field. I mean, even the conversation this year, it was all about getting men's sport back. Nobody even cared about getting women's sport back. It was almost like, get men's sport back, because that's where they see the majority, and that's also where they see the money. So I think, you can even see, which is really disappointing because we had the Women's World Cup last year, and which made massive steps, in equality. But then, this year it's kind of like the conversation's hardly been about women's sport. So I think, like anything though, I think change takes time, but it is changing. I think it's going in the right direction, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I mean, you still get people making comments about, women's sport and things like that. But I think if you go and speak to young children, that's where you see the change. And that's where it's important, because it's those young children that are going to be kind of then become my age and have those opportunities. Oh, wow. Sport, football, it plays such a huge part of the conversation in terms of mental health for so many reasons. For an individual to go and do sport, it helps their mental health. For me, it's a massive savior. It's a crutch. It's like a therapy. It's my meditation. I couldn't not do it. I'd really struggle if I didn't do physical activity and sport. I'd really, really mentally struggle. So on an individual level, it's so important. But then on a community level, it gives people hope. It gives people community, on a community level, friendships, hope, a safe place. And it's so important that, and for young people, it's also a place that it can give you a sense of identity, a sense of achievement. It can help you fulfill potential. It can help you realize that, oh yeah, you can actually break those boundaries, because that's what sport is about. But it also gives you, I'm going on so many levels, because it's like so important on an individual and then so important in a wider kind of cultural context, but it also gives you like an amazing relationship with yourself, which is so important in terms of mental health and in terms of growth. But I think just singling out on football, it's a place where, I've been to so many football matches and, I've probably had nothing much in common with this person behind me, but I've got football in common with them and they support the same team as me. And then you have this conversation and it doesn't matter whether it's like somebody my age, a 16-year-old, and then you've got like an 85-year-old sat there, and you can see the way it puts smiles on people's faces. But the thing is as well about sport, and I've done quite a lot of work with the EFL and Mind on this, is that if you're using sport, like I do a podcast called My Sport in Mind, and you can use sport as a way to create a conversation that might be quite difficult to normally have. And I think that's, as a woman, I feel it's difficult sometimes to talk about mental health, but I know that for men, due to gender stereotyping, it can be really difficult as well. And I have 3 younger brothers, and it's so important that you use certain things to be able to have that conversation around mental health. And that's where football comes in and sport comes in as a whole, because it's that kind of safe area and safe place of football. You're supporting your team, and then it's opening those conversations that might be quite difficult to have here. But if you put football there and sport there, then you can kind of like break those barriers to be able to have those conversations, to talk about mental health and to get rid of the stigma.